Good afternoon. President Armacost, First Lady Kathy Armacost, academic deans, UND students, faculty, staff, friends, members of the community. I'm Art Malloy, Vice President for Student Affairs, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Aim High, Leave a Legacy, a fireside chat with two very distinguished individuals. As you know, February is Black History Month. It's a time to reflect upon the remarkable transition for blacks in the United States from slavery to full citizenship. There is no better time to be mindful of the wonderful contributions that black scientists, architects, civil engineers, artists, and others have had on American society. But it's also a time to remember that the journey was not always one that blacks traveled alone. So we are thankful to people like William Lloyd Garrison and a significant number of other white abolitionists who risked their lives in their fight against slavery. We are mindful of the contribution of Harriet Beecher Stowe, of Eleanor Roosevelt, and the thousands of Americans who formed a rainbow coalition of people who stood side by side with blacks in the civil rights movement. We can all proudly observe Black History Month because it took each of us to achieve what has been achieved. And together, we can face any challenge that comes our way. Now for the business at hand. I would like to welcome UND student and commercial aviation major, Abraham Akinbobola, to introduce our featured guests.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Abraham Akinbobola, the current president of OBAP, and I'll be introducing the guests today. Kenyatta Ruffin is a colonel in the U.S. Air Force Reserve, prior F-16 fighter pilot, and B-737 captain at the United States Airlines. A renowned leader with the spirit of youth and diversity in aviation, Captain Ruffin grew up outside of Chicago, Illinois. He first began flying at the age of 13. He's a 2003 graduate from the U.S. Air Force Academy and a 2017 graduate from the U.S. Army School of Advanced Military Studies. He has a distinguished and diverse military career, lodging over 750 combat hours in F-16 and M12 aircraft. He has earned 7 air medals and was the ISR mission commander for the second largest special operation range in the Afghanistan history. He has served as a squadron commander and was twice assigned a strategist in the Pentagon and was selected by President Biden as a White House Fellow, one of the nation's most prestigious leadership programs, where he served in the office of the National Cyber Director. With a passion of mentoring and inspiring youth, in 2017, Captain Ruffin founded the Legacy Flight Academy, LFA, a non-profit organization that conducts character-based youth aviation program and draws upon the legacy of the historic Tuskegee Airmen. He is dedicated to pay it forward, and he has granted him wide recognition, but the most cherished receiving from the 1st Brigadier General Charles McGinn Aviation Inspiration Award by the Aircraft Owners and Pilot Association in 2020. His combat experience and many other things in life has deepened his faith and solidified the things he cherished most in life, his family. He's married to the former Tenny Peterson of Philadelphia, PA, and currently has 6 kids: Tabitha and Lydia, Joanna, Titus, Matthias, and Priscilla. Dr. Kraus, you have the floor.
Welcome, everyone. So we're proud to be here today, proud to welcome Kenny to the UND campus. It's his first time to UND.
Yes, it is.
And so there is a little bit of history here. So a little more than 20 years ago, I had him in class. And so that's kind of how this all came about. I taught a flight test techniques class at the Air Force Academy, and it was his senior year. And so when this opportunity came up, Dr. Molloy contacted me. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do this. Reminds us of, I think the last time I talked to him was potentially at the oral final exam that we gave in that class.
Exactly.
But before we get too far into this, I want to give it over to him for an opening statement.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Kraus, sir. And thank you all to everyone who is in attendance. Thank you to General Armacost and Dr. Molloy for this opportunity. But truly, thank you for all of you who are here in this room. And so in the military, before we start any mission or any engagement, we always have our objectives for it. And so don't really have an objective today, but I do have a goal. And my goal today is to inspire the entire UND community to aim higher and leave a legacy. And so that's what we're going to do today. And so one of the other things when we are doing our missions and flying is we talk about ROE, rules of engagement. And so rules of engagement is all about roles and responsibilities, your job, my job, how we're going to work together. And so Dr. Kraus and I actually have the really easy job of just sitting up here and talking, but each of you have the difficult and the more important job because you have to think. So, although this isn't a class, and although there's not just students in the room, would not be offended if you take notes. And I really look forward to this opportunity. And as we say, fight's on.
So one of the things that came up in your biography there was your first flight was at 10 years old. So obviously you were interested in flying at a young age. What inspired that dream, and how did you get started?
Absolutely. So as every good story starts, so there I was. 5 years old, one cold winter morning, and like most 5-year-olds, I was watching TV. And the day was January 28th, 1986. And it was the day that some of you may remember is the Space Shuttle Challenger tragedy. And so I was there that day, glued at the TV, watching it, looking for this triumphant episode of going to space, and instead there was obviously tragedy. And for whatever reason, that captivated my attention. Those brave 7 Americans were on a mission to do something great, and they unfortunately were unable to do that day. I said, but I could be like them. I could do something brave and great. And so that just began my journey where I was absolutely obsessed, honestly, with becoming an astronaut. It wasn't just a dream, but it was something I was determined to do. It was a dream plus a plan, which makes it a goal. And so, like anyone who wants to be an astronaut, I went to space camp. I did all the things. I would go to my local library to read all the books I could about being an astronaut in space. And I wouldn't just be upstairs, but I would go downstairs and to the adult section and get these books. And at first, when I come in with these stack of books, higher than me and have to lift them up over the shelves, and the librarian's like, what's going on? And I'm like, no, check these out. I want to read them. And then I'd come back the next week, and I'd have another stack of books, and they'd still look at me kind of side-eye. But after the 3rd or 4th or 20th time, they stopped questioning and just gave me the book. And so my mom would drive me, to all the local libraries in our community, and I swear that any library within a 20-mile radius of where I live, I read every single book about being an astronaut. And so that was really the beginning of my journey of becoming an astronaut. And I was fortunate. I was 13 when I first started flying. 14, I soloed. I flew all by myself. 16, I earned my private pilot's license, took my mom flying, people flying. And then 18, I had my certified flight instructor's license. I was one of the youngest flight instructors in America. I could teach anyone how to fly an airplane. The only problem is they'd have to drive me to the airport because I didn't have my driver's license yet. And so, as they say, the rest is history.
So just to let you know how unusual that is, so the students that come here for commercial aviation, they don't earn their flight instructor rating until junior or senior year. So to have it at 18, outside of a collegiate program like ours is extremely unusual, and it shows dedication and a support network.
Yes.
So
Amen
let's
to
talk
that.
about the support network you had. So you must have had mentors and people that helped you along the way.
Absolutely. So it really starts at home, and there's just so much to talk about this support network, and we're going to talk a lot of things, and it'll go kind of out of order in my mind, but I want to get these important things out. And the most important thing is that nothing that I've done has been on my own. It is absolutely what they say, it takes a village, right? And so starts with my mom, starts with being surrounded by a community that supports you and encourages you, that has resources and on. And so I can't say enough about the entire journey that I've had and the people that have been involved, and we can talk about some of those specifics for
So
sure.
we'll get to the Air Force in a second. So even before you went to the Air Force Academy, you were involved in STEM and STEM outreach activities. So you're already giving back and mentoring. So talk about what led you to do that outreach.
Absolutely. So I went to what's called the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy. We call it IMSA for high school, and it's a public high school, but it's a residential high school. So we lived on campus, and it was like applying to college. You had to take the SAT as a freshman to get in, and recommendations, essays, and all that. And I had peers who were scoring perfect on the SAT and things like that, but I was not one of those people, but still fortunate enough to get into IMSA. And there I got to really continue to fly. That's where I was, after I had soloed, I was 15 and really did a lot of flying. And so I'll give a short story about that, but the bigger one is about the leadership. But first, the flying, because we're at UND. So one of the most memorable experiences I had was teaching another high school student, she was a year younger than me, how to fly. And so flying gliders, and her dad was paying for her to learn how to fly. She wasn't learning how to fly. She would go up and she would just enjoy the sightseeing. And so I felt bad. I'm like, I'm doing all this flying, but you're I'm trying to encourage her to fly, right? And so as we've been doing this for weeks and months, she finally is flying a little bit and more, and now we're in the pattern, and I've got her, she's on downwind and base and like on final, and I'm like, yes, I'm the best instructor in the world. I've got this student to learn how to fly. And so we roll out on final, and we're about 400 feet, half a mile from the runway. And then she's flying, and she's doing great. And then she goes, I don't want to fly, I don't want to fly, I don't want to fly. Throws her hands up in the air. And at that very moment, I had a decision to make. What am I going to do to help this student learn how to fly? And so in my 17-year-old mind, as an instructor then, as a young instructor, fledgling instructor, I decided the best thing for me to do, as we're sitting tandem, I'm in the back and she's in front, is that I should put my hands on her shoulder and then say, I don't want to fly, I don't want to fly, I don't want to fly either. And so for about 5 seconds, no one's just flying this glider as it's just coming down. And so about 200 feet, 100 feet, I shifted, I grabbed the controls, and it's a glider. If any of you flown gliders, it's a glider. It's not that hard. Dr. Malloy could fly a glider and land the glider. So I landed the glider and all was well. But that was a really actually a pivotal moment for me that helped me as an aviator and as an instructor, because after safety, the most important thing is that student. Are they learning? Right? It's not the syllabus. It's not the time. It's what are you doing to help make that student learn? And so that was definitely a flying pivotal moment that I had during high school. But the broader context is much bigger than that. So again, IMSA was a public residential high school, great environment that is much like UND. Great people, great resources, great opportunities. And I was in student government, and I remember, I don't know what the meeting was, I just remember it was with the president, and she asked, what's possible? What's possible? And for whatever reason, I'm at Math and Science Academy surrounded by people that like math and science. I said, well, I like math and science. We like math and science. What's possible? Can we help others to like math and science? And specifically, can we as high school students help elementary and younger students like math and science? And so what ended up happening was I was fortunate enough to lead the project. We called it Science Explorers, where in the summer we would do two one-week summer camps where the high school students were teaching STEM and doing experiments with these elementary school students. And had support obviously of faculty and corporate sponsorship, and it actually grew and took off so much that it became an enduring department and aspect of IMSA, in which we called it the Kids Institute, that was worth millions of dollars and did programs all throughout the state of Illinois. And so what I learned and what really was the spark was the simple question, what's possible? And I think that's a question that each of you, that every one of us should always ask ourselves, what's possible?
So following that, you applied to and went through the whole process to get into the Air Force Academy. So you have to seek a application from your elected representatives from Washington, D.C. You go through the whole process. You got in, you got to the Academy. So talk about your 4 years at the Academy and how much of a culture shock was that?
Right.
And talk about that.
Oh, the zoo, sir. Oh, our wonderful alma mater. So your United States Air Force Academy is often referenced as the zoo. And that's for a very good reason. It is actually the second most popular tourist attraction in the entire state of Colorado after Pikes Peak is the United States Air Force Academy. And as a freshman, you have to run the strips. There's these marble slabs where you have to run everywhere you go and a whole bunch of other things. But I remember running along the strips against the wall. So there's a wall there. And now, after 9/11, there's a fence. And so you're literally fenced in a cage. And I remember hearing someone say, oh, look, there's a female one. And so it's a lot like a zoo. And also, on that very first night, that very first morning in the summer and basic training, your literal very first day, they wake you up at the most ungodly hour of the morning, well before the sun is up, with the one and only possible way they could wake you. Blaring out loud forever, welcome to the jungle.
Yeah.
And so you could do no amount of push-ups or sit-ups or be fast enough for them to stop. All you hear was welcome to the jungle. So
Hell's Bells from AC/DC works well too, just to have those bells going off.
So other than that, the Air Force Academy is totally like every other, normal college there. And so like most schools, it has a dean's list for academic performance and achievement. I was on the dean's other list for non-academic performance, and it was a really great time. Honestly, I learned there, I grew there in two specific interrelated ways. The first is that my goals changed, my goals shifted. I was absolutely passionate about being an astronaut. I was going to fly F-16s. I had it all figured out. Got to the Air Force Academy, and I realized that I liked math and science, and I was good at math and science, but I didn't love math and science, and I definitely wasn't great at it. Sir, I know you have a security clearance, but this is not necessarily a secure room. I don't know about everyone else, so I will just say that I can neither confirm nor deny that I took engineering mechanics 3 times. I'll just put that out there. And so as I saw my passion about being an astronaut kind of start to wane and descend, my passion for leading was just taken off.
So one thing I can give him some defense here. So the class that I taught was a special engineering class that we only allowed 24 students total for the entire year. And so we had students apply to the course. We looked at their GPA. We looked at their entire package, and we only allowed 24 in, and that had to do with we were limited by the number of slots that we had because we flew in the course also. He was selected for that course. So even though he self-deprecating humor here, he was good enough to get into the course, and he did well in the course.
Yeah.
But not only that, you flew while you were at the
Yes.
academy.
I
So
flew, that's actually one of the things I did the most. I had a love for flying. I still have a love for flying, and I was able to be the squadron commander of the soaring squadron of the gliders, teaching hundreds of cadets to fly. In that year, I was the commander. I was the Protestant Advisory Council president, and I was my class vice president. And so this goal shifting and this developing this love for leading and passion and developing my own core values about what do I think about leadership. The Air Force has our core values of integrity, service, and excellence. And I remember when I was there, the new model about leadership was developing aerospace leaders and transformational leadership, right? And those are all good, but those are what they say and what the institution says. Those 4 years were a time where I learned what do I think about leadership? What do I believe that's important? And so that opportunity to grow and learn, it's really absolutely what set the foundation for not just my career, but really the rest of my life.
So you earned a degree in aeronautical engineering. So he is an engineering graduate. And then you went off to pilot training.
Right.
So talk about pilot training and how you got to the F-16.
Yeah, so pilot training, right? So pilot training is a blast. So most people, when they graduate from the Air Force Academy, get 60 days of paid vacation, and most people don't start pilot training for 6 months, 9 months, or a year later. I started pilot training 30 days after I graduated from the Air Force Academy because all I wanted to do was go fly F-16s. And it's actually a funny story, one that reminds me whenever I think I'm too good. This is a great reminder. So during pilot training, you take check rides. You take 4 check rides. And the average number of downgrades, what you did wrong, is about 2 to 4 on each check ride, right? And so by the time you get to that last check ride, you've had, the good students have had 10 downgrades, and those are the good students. The average and okay students were 20s and 30 downgrade. Going into I had taken 3 check rides, and I'd had 4 downgrades. I had a perfect instrument flight. I had 0 downgrades for my instrument check ride, same as the commercial instrument. And then we got to formation. And I hadn't failed a ride yet, and it was the ride before my check ride, and I failed it. And then I took my check ride, and I got 12 or 17 downgrades. And so it was a very quick reminder that I'm not Chuck Yeager, and that all is well. And so I was able to go on to the next phase, get T-38s, and then earn F-16. But there was nothing harder that I've ever done in my life than pilot training. It was the 4 years at the Air Force Academy condensed into 1, and so it was a challenge, but it was rewarding and allowed me to fly the best plane in the world, the F-16.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? So you've flown a bunch of airplanes.
Yeah.
What's it like to fly an F-16?
Yeah, so this is an easy one. So I've got 2 great flying stories in general in my career. I've got multiple ones, but 2 of my most memorable ones are both in the F-16. One's fun and one is a little more serious. So the fun one. If you have ever been at 49,960 feet, traveling at 1.56 Mach, that over 1.5 times the speed of sound, you've been able to look down and see the world literally fly by. And at that altitude, you would know that Aristotle was indeed right, and sorry to let all you flat earthers know, the earth is indeed round, because you can see the curvature of the earth. And the horizon goes from blue to shades of gray and a little bit of black. And so that deployment in Malaysia was pretty freaking awesome to do that. The next really most memorable, one of the most memorable stories on the F-16, it was quite a serious one, was when I was in combat in 2007 in Iraq. It was the surge in Iraq where combat was most intense. And we were doing what we normally do, which is overwatch. We're protecting the guys on the ground. And they got into this team of Army soldiers, about a dozen or so, got ambushed. They got into a trap. They were in a kill box. They got caught in a dead-end alley. Their Humvee vehicles broke down, and they were taking fire from all sides. And so I don't know if anyone's ever played the game of telephone or remember the game of telephone, right? You say something one end and watch it go all the way through and see what you get out on the other end. It's all well and good when it's a game. But when it's life or death and you're at 20,000 feet and you're going 400 miles an hour, the game of telephone is a little bit more serious. And what happened was when situations are dire like that, we always fly with a wingman, right? Flight lead, wingman. You have that mutual support, but when it goes really bad, we end up doing detached mutual support called yo-yo outs, where you go to the tanker and come back, and then I go to the tanker, so that we never leave the guys on the ground by themselves. And so we had to do this yo-yo ops. And so as all this confusion was going on, as I got further away, because I was further away, I could start to hear better with the radio jamming and communication. So now I could hear what the guys on the ground were saying, but I was far away, I couldn't see it. And so I could tell my wingman and tell the other airplanes that were overhead what was going on. And then they would tell me what they saw, and then I'd tell the guys on the ground, and we played this game of telephone for 45 minutes. As, again, things were continuing to happen, and they were continuously under fire. Eventually, after, again, 45 minutes later, they were able to disengage. They were able to repair their vehicles, whatever they were doing on the ground, and they were able to egress and escape alive. And it still chills. When we were leaving station, they said, "Thanks, Fight for Flight, you saved our lives."
So, some of you may know we have an Air Force base here in Grand Forks. What you may not know is one of the missions that's underneath this wing now is there's an airplane called the Airborne Express. So it's a global express jet that basically the problem that he talked about of having this person not being able to talk to that person because they're in a different place. You fly a business jet at 45,000 feet and just park it there. Yeah. And it's a radio communication system. And it has all of the changing of radios that the guys on the ground might be on one frequency and the airplane might be on another frequency. And so now our wing has an airplane somewhere that basically just parks over the area, and so that everybody can talk to each other, and so we don't have issues like that anymore. And so that's something that came out of that.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned deployment. So we're going to talk some legacy now. Yeah. And so you were part of the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing, and there's some history with that unit. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Just a little bit. So there's this small, quite impactful organization called the Tuskegee Airmen, who were the original 332nd. And when I deployed, it was the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing. It was originally the 332nd Fighter Group at Tuskegee in Moultonfield, Alabama, with the Tuskegee Airmen. And so that group, that organization that was in Iraq and that we still have today in the Air Force, is literally the exact same descendants of the original Tuskegee Airmen. And so when I landed in Iraq and I got to put the patch, the 332nd patch on my shoulder, which again is the same patch that the original airman had with a lion spitting fire, and it spit fire on my shoulder, and to become a real Tuskegee Airman myself was surreal, because part of the story that we didn't talk about of how I got to start flying and things was, when I was 13 and 14 and throughout the summer, I was involved in summer camps that were sponsored by OBAP, Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, and the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. And so when I was growing up, I knew several original Tuskegee Airmen, and I was taught by someone who actually was at Tuskegee. He actually didn't make it through the program at Tuskegee, but he was there, and I actually flew with, and he taught me. And I have a very tight and enduring connection with the Tuskegee Airmen, as the Tuskegee Airmen, of course, were the first black military pilots in the world, and were the precursor to the civil rights movement, and just not enough things or times. We could have several lectures about the Tuskegee Airmen. And so to be a real, actual Tuskegee Airman myself was just absolutely incredible. And again, I'll try not to be too emotional about it, but I got back from that deployment and was at a Tuskegee Airmen conference, and I got to see one of my friends, one of the original airmen. You might have even met him when we had some of the banquets there. His name's Colonel Fitzroy Buck Newsom. His call sign's Buck Newsom. He's an older gentleman, obviously, at that time in his 80s, and didn't speak much, a little hunched over and stuff, but he was still passionate, and you would see it in his eyes, and you got him talk about flying. It was great. Like, he started talking about flying, and I was able to see him at the convention. I said, hey, great to see you. Haven't seen you in a couple years since I went to the academy, and I'm a fighter pilot now, just like you were a fighter pilot. And not only am I a fighter pilot like you were, but I was in your organization, and I had an extra patch, and I gave him one of the patches. And to better appreciate what he went through, he understood some of what I went through, and it was amazing.
Pretty emotional event.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll shift gears a little bit,
Yeah.
away from the emotional stuff. So let's
we
talk.
We might get back to that story.
I'm sure we will.
There's a great story there, actually.
So the White House.
Oh gosh.
White House Fellow.
Yeah.
For cybersecurity, National Cyber Director. You want to talk? How did you get that? And then talk about working in the White House environment.
Yeah. So that's a joyous topic. Everyone, I love to tell you that working in the White House was awesome, and roses and fairy tales. And unfortunately, working in the White House was one of the most frustrating and disappointing experiences of my entire life. I could talk to you about, you can Google about the White House Fellowship in the program, and it's an honor to be a part of, to be a White House Fellow. We have several of them. Sanjay Gupta on CNN is a White House Fellow. I actually originally first heard of the White House Fellowship when I was a cadet reading Colin Powell's autobiography. Colin Powell was a White House Fellow, and so there's quite a few famous people and amazing people that are White House Fellows, and so it's a great program, and I would recommend it for everyone, and everyone has their own experience. Some of my classmates had total opposite experience of mine. Mine was not. And the reason why I found out and I learned, I still grew a lot during that time, and it was clear. It's because, unfortunately, in the White House, I worked in the White House proper. So the program, you work all across the executive branch, different departments, State Department, wherever, but my placement was in the White House executive office of the president. And so surrounded by the innermost circle, and I was surrounded by people who had a slightly jaded perspective. The perspectives of many of the people weren't like LFA in the military. They were very much politically based. And so what I mean by politics is this. Their perspective was, and their interactions were transactional. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? There was very little actual relationship. And so that was the quid pro quo, right? Like it was pervasive. But that was the good side of things. Those who were more abase, who let that political aspect completely dominate them, were those who were focused on power. That Machiavellian nature in them permeated everything they do, and it just soured all the environment and the culture, and it didn't matter who they stepped on or what they destroyed, as long as they got their way and as long as they were in power. And so that political or power perspective was a affront to me, and I think it would be an affront to you and to you, because that's not who you are. That's not who I am. That's not how I view things. I try to live my life with purpose. And I was fortunate enough, though, to work for the National Cyber Director, a fellow Zoomy, actually, a fellow Academy grad, who said something that has joyfully haunted me every single day of my life since I heard it. He said, "What is the purpose of your power?" What is the purpose of your power? Let that one sink in for a minute, a day, or a lifetime. And that is by far my number one lesson that I learned from the White House.
So speaking of purpose, you have a family. How do you balance, and you've been busy,
Yes.
deployments and serving and working in the White House and all these different things. How do you balance military service, family life, and your personal commitments?
Yep. So as my wife and I say, we have 6 normally adorable children, and sometimes they're not so adorable, and so it's fun and it's a challenge. And I will say this, that I definitely did not do it well at the beginning. Multiple times in seasons where I dropped the ball, and I really think that it's a lot of grace that I'm still here and that we are still here today. And one of the things that one of my mentors told me at some point, what he said was, he doesn't believe in work-life balance, because balance requires equality, right? But he talks about work-life harmony, right? And about how things ebb and flows and in different seasons and demands shift. And I personally, that makes more sense to me, and it works. My wife's not buying it, by the way. My wife's like, yeah, it doesn't matter how low you turn down the bass if you're still drowning out everything else. And she's right. But if you actually are seeking a better harmony, a better balance, I think you can achieve that. And for me, what has helped as I grew and matured was going to that foundation of what I believed, of what I developed at the Academy about my purpose, right? And I have priorities, my priorities in life, my 4 F priorities that are blanket, universal, full stop, always. Faith, family, freedom, flying. Those are my 4 priorities. And as I grew and better, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, I was able to better execute, and I was better able to accept the consequences as well as the rewards of being so grounded and having my priorities clearly understood and straightened. And then the other thing I think that really helps with achieving the balance, what balance in what I have in my life, is by having a full 100% partner in my beautiful wife, Tanae. She's still home with the kids now. And what I used to tell students, my last line assignment was at pilot training, right out of college, so a lot of people here, I used to say, you don't want to be late or absent on the day that they're issuing the spouses. You don't want to be late or absent on the day they're issuing out the spouses. And what I mean by that is, how important is that to you? we focus a lot on pilot training, on getting your degree, on a 20-year career, a 9-to-5 job, on tenure, on your dissertation. There's a lot of things that we focus on in life that are finite, that are constrained. But the commitment to be there through thick and thin, and again, my wife and I just have this overwhelming partnership that I think allows us to pursue some level of balance or harmony.
So post Air Force, you're at United Airlines now, flying a 737. I saw a picture on social media that you got to fly with somebody special.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yep. So I've been a captain at United Airlines now for 50 days, something like that. So December, I finished my training. I was on my very first flight as a captain at United. And what we haven't really talked about fully is that I love flying, and that's probably natural because the joke is that I've been flying since before I was born because my mom was a 45-year flight attendant for United Airlines. And so on my very first flight as a captain at United, on December 9th, when I turned 44, my mom actually was one of my flight attendants on my flight. And so that was a very cool story, and honestly, it probably meant more, even more to her than to me. When I was growing up, when I was flying as a teenager, every summer in the OBAP camp in the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated program, the Flight Academy, they would have a 2-week summer flight academy in Indiana. We lived outside Chicago. And my mom would get up with me and my 2 younger brothers, and she would drive me 2+ hours to camp to be there at, again, a really early time in the morning. I'm not a morning person. Really early in the morning, drive back home. Then the late afternoon, evening, drive 2 hours there, pick me up, drive back home to just get up and do it again the very next day. So my mom has definitely invested and sacrificed a lot to helping set that foundation for me. And so I think she was proud, and it was definitely a cool experience to fly with my mom.
So we do want to save some time for questions, but you did want to have some closing remarks.
Yeah, I'll wait till after the
Okay.
questions. So if we're ready for questions,
We're ready for questions.
I think I am.
We do. Raise your hand, and I think we have a microphone over here that someone's going to bring around.
Yeah.
Someone has a question. Anyone? Or if you can step over to the microphone or grab it.
Yeah, I guess we can put it in the middle. Go ahead, sorry, then I'll repeat, Brad.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks.
You've had such a wide variety of experiences between being in combat, being in IP. What would you tell your past self? The academy?
I know, right?
That's one of my questions. Excellent.
So the question is, what would I tell my younger self, right? And that is, I absolutely love this question. There's some questions I don't like. This one I love. Because it's not just what I would tell my younger self, but it's what I would tell my not so younger self. It's that this pursuit of excellence and significance is going to be harder than you ever imagined. But that it is damn sure worth it. It was worth it when I got to hear those Army soldiers say thanks, and they get to go home alive to their families. It was worth it. We haven't talked about LFA that much, but the thousands of people that we have influenced and impacted with LFA, and fathers and mothers come up to me years later and tell me about the difference that LFA made in their son or daughter's life, it was worth it. And it's worth it if today in this room there is one person who is inspired to dig a little bit deeper. it's worth it if one person will push a little bit harder. It's worth it if one person will aim a little bit higher.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Legacy Flight Academy?
Yeah, Legacy Flight Academy. So, part of the and be thinking of your other questions, right? This is great. This is good. Legacy Flight Academy is first and foremost an accident. I don't know how you accidentally start a nationwide nonprofit organization, but yeah, this guy managed to do that. And LFA, I would call it, as well as the science explorers, what you see, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't a matter of if I would give back, but when and how I would give back. It wasn't a choice. I have been so blessed and had so much and so many people give to me. How could I not give back to others? You know, now a little bit older now, and even probably starting LFA in my 30s, I have a favorite Bible verse that says, "To whom much is given, much is required." And it really, when I was younger, I didn't know that verse. It was just that simple, right? Like, whatever level of success and achievement I have had, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, because there's been other people that have been encouraging me. It's been other resources, right? It's been like you have here at UND, hint, hint, where you have a community and opportunity. And then so what I was decided to do, again, I love flying, and I was actually in Iraq with the 332nd patch on my shoulder when I first put pen to paper about this idea of, I just want to teach some people how to fly. And let's do it at Tuskegee, where the Tuskegee Airmen did it, right? And so I was trying to do this great thing where we take young students, high schools from all across the nation, and they would learn how to fly at Tuskegee. And so after the first year of trying to do this thing that was, again, much bigger than myself, biting off a little bit more than I can chew, I went back to the basics of, oh yeah, right, it takes a village, it takes teamwork, it takes a wingman. And so I reached out to two other individuals that I saw who were doing the same thing, who were committed to the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen, who were already out there inspiring and motivating and sacrificing. One of them I knew a little bit from the academy. His name's Aaron Jones. He's 2 years behind me, and he flew F-15s, and so I try not to hold that against him. And then another guy is Kenny Thomas. Never met him before in my life. I said, hey, I see what you're doing on Facebook. Why don't you come out to this camp that I'm running? Here's a little bit what I'm doing, and come be a part of it. And then the three of us formed this bond, and we partnered, and that's how LFA really has grown to be what it is now, and as well as a multitude of other, obviously, volunteers and teammates. And so when we think about the impact that LFA has made, it's really easy and it's awesome to talk about the data, right? The faceless data. We've flown nearly 3,000 people on a free orientation flight. We've given out nearly $100,000 in scholarships. We've reached hundreds of thousands in our programs. We did things at the National Air and Space Museum in DC, right? Like, those are all well and good, but it's the individual person, right? When a young person gets down from flying and they never thought they would ever fly a plane, and then they just did that, we say, what else is it that you never thought you could do that now you realize impossible isn't? And so it's been an absolute joy to be a part of this continuing effort to keep up their legacy of the heroic Tuskegee Airmen, but more importantly to inspire the next generation. And part of what I didn't say to begin with, because Dr. Malloy had already stolen some of my thunder, is this is a Black History Month event right now, but really it's as much, and I would argue maybe even more, an American future event. And so that's what the Tuskegee Airmen are all about. That's what we've been all about. And hopefully in all this, what you're hearing is some of the words and reflections of a great philosopher that you may have heard of recently, earlier this month, in fact, and that's Super Bowl winning head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Sirianni. You can't be great without the greatness of others. Truer words have never been spoken.
Any other questions? Any?
I have one.
All right.
Could you tell us any connection you have with President Armacost?
Yes. So General Armacost was the dean of the Air Force Academy. I was long gone. And I was in the Pentagon. I was working, one of my prior jobs in the Air Force was in charge of all pilot strategy and outreach and diversity. And so obviously Air Force is a large organization. I'm working in the Pentagon in DC doing my thing. And then I get this text message. I've got it on my phone. I was going to read it verbatim, but I get this message on LinkedIn one day. It's like, "Hi, I'm Andy, and I just got your brief. I saw what you're doing, and we are excited at the Air Force Academy, and we want to help, and you're doing a great job. Keep it up." And I'm like, profile? Oh, yes, General. All right, and so it was just amazing. I think this is a great segue, if I can, to talk about mentors and mentorship, because I think sometimes we make mentorship either far too complex or conversely, we don't understand the spectrum of it. And so mentorship is a passion of mine, and helping and serving others is. And so the framework I use is more along of a spectrum of what mentorship is. And that spectrum goes from role models to supporters to mentors to sponsors. And not that those are four distinct things and places, but this is along the spectrum. And how it works is those role models, it's all about perspective along this spectrum. Those role models are the ones that you are looking back at them, at their challenges, their opportunities, their successes. You're looking at theirs, looking back at theirs, so you can look forward to yours, right? They're providing you that encouragement, that drive, that, hey, this, what's possible? Then you have the supporters, right? You have the General Armacostas, who might not know you, who might not have this deep connection with you, but they can see you. They can see your challenges. They can see your opportunities. They can see your successes. And they encourage you. They help you. Then you have those traditional mentors that we think about, right? And that perspective is a unique one because it's together. Mm-hmm. Together, we are looking at my challenges, my opportunities, my successes. And together, you're going to assist me and guide me and provide help. And then last, you have these sponsors who oftentimes, we talk a lot about sponsorship in the military, oftentimes you don't even know these people exist. Again, you might not have that relationship. It's because they're at a place in their perspective of they've been there, done that. They're in that position. And so they're looking back at you now, and they're looking at your challenges and your opportunities and your successes and things you don't even know, and they are making a way for you. And so in my life, how that has been is, I can't even count the number of role models, again, just how blessed I've been to know a lot of my role models. Again, by the time I went to the academy, I knew about, I'd spoken with and known about, 2 or 3 astronauts and half a dozen Tuskegee Airmen. And so those were my role models. And then the supporters are fun. This is a great story of my great-grandmother. We called her Ran. And so when I was a kid, 6 or 7, so I already wanted to be an astronaut. And so apparently I thought my great-grandmother would help me be an astronaut. I'm going to her house in the summer, and she said she had a red wagon, and she would pull me around the country in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I would say, "Faster, Ran, faster." And so she tells the story. She used to tell the story. When I started flying gliders, she would tell the story about how she would drive me around and say, "Faster, Ran, faster." And then say, "Look at you now, you out there flying those big jets. Is that fast enough for you?" For any of us who know that gliders go about 25 miles an hour, and they're not that big, but the point is well taken that she was supporting me, right? She saw that I was trying to achieve something, and she supported me. The mentors, the thing about the mentors that I have, I think that's important about mentorship is to realize that it's very situationally dependent. It's about that season. For me, it's about that season. It's about what's going on in that upcoming or that near-term, near-rocks obstacle or challenge. Your dissertation advisor, right? Your teacher. It's someone that's with you that has to have that relationship. And then lastly is the sponsors. Again, I may or may not have sponsors in my life. I know there's one general that I look forward to, and he used to say that everyone talks about it's not what you know, but who you know that matters. He's like, no, that's wrong. It's all about who knows you that matters. And so you want to have a good reputation and quality of work that allows that sponsor to be there. And so my hope is that each of you don't think about that as like, where can you get a mentor along that spectrum, but rather how you can be a mentor along that spectrum. Who is it that you can encourage when they write your name in your hometown newspaper, if they even have those anymore, when they post it on Facebook, who's going to be looking back and being inspired by you? Who are you going to walk down the hall with and see them struggling and say, "Hey, I was just in that class last semester, you can do it"? Who are you going to work together with so they can achieve? And in a couple of years, because it comes faster than you think, when you're sitting on this stage, who are you going to be able to pull up?
So my last question before your closing remarks.
Yep.
What's next?
What's next? Oh my goodness! I thought you would have the answer to that. I was hoping job openings. How did this interview go? The reality is I don't know.
The application window's open, by the way.
Okay, all right, great. There's a lot of unknowns right now. A lot of changes. I was just promoted in the Air Force, changed jobs. By the way, I never, ever, ever wanted to be an airline pilot. It's okay as things change, and so I mean. This story has been crazy and too many plot twists. I mean, I have 6 kids for crying out loud. Like, who planned that? So we don't know. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern right now as the dust kind of settles and I see what's next. And so I'll have to get back to you when I come back. And so the last thing, if I can, I know we're got time up, but I'll close with this if you can bring up the slide. So if you remember when I started out, right, talking about what this event is and the goals that we had, and the goals I had for this event. And so it is Black History Month, but it's about America's future. And so this is an incredible American who happened to be black, who was the first black 4-star general in the United States military. But he didn't let any of those things define him. He has 2 quotes that I want to leave you with that are pretty impactful and important. First quote is this: "The power of excellence is overwhelming. It is always in demand, and nobody cares about its color." The power of excellence. The next quote I have from him, I'll let you read as I gather my thoughts. I have fought in 3 wars for my country. And 3 more would not be enough. America's not perfect. But when she is sick or have ills, I'll hold her hand. Hopefully, we will all hold her hand. Thank you.
Thanks. Great job.
Thank you.
We want to thank Kenny Ruffin for joining us. We want to thank OBAP for helping organize this, Dr. Malloy for putting this together. So enjoy the rest of the day.
And as you are leaving, there is another event that is going on. It is a Rosa Parks exhibit that is being sponsored by the Hilliard Center. As you walk out the door, you will see it. As you walk across the hallway, it will be immediately to your right. Thank you all for being here. I did hear something that I think is extremely important when Kenny talked about finding a role model. I think it is important to find a role model, but I think it is equally important for you as college students and professors and deans to be role models also. So my challenge to you is be a role model. If you're already one, I challenge you to continue to be one. And many thanks to the Student Government President, Connor Ferguson, for being here also. Thank you very much.